Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's Beatriz again from the Supervisory ICT Risk and Cybersecurity function within the Malta Financial Services Authority, bringing you yet another Digital Operational Resilience Act videocast, which is a series of videocasts being produced by the authority in preparation for the date of applicability of the DORA regulation on the 17th January 2025. So today's episode is a continuation of the last episode in which we spoke about Chapter 4 of the DORA regulation. So we spoke more specifically about digital operational resilience testing, requirements, general requirements for such testing, the testing program that financial entities should have, pen testing, and also a little bit of penetration testing. And today's episode, we are going to dive deeper into what TIBER-EU framework is and what's the relationship between TIBER-EU framework and the DORA regulation. So to start, we have also as guests Mihai Tachiron and Dino Conchi today. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me yet again.
Hello again, Beatriz. My name is Mihai Țătiran. I am an IT auditor within the Central Bank of Romania, and I was recently involved in the development aspects of the TIBER-EU framework in Malta as my external assignment with the MFSA. I hope that the previous episode succeeded to introduce forthcoming TLPT activities that are required by DORA regulation starting with the beginning of the 2025.
Thank you, Beatrice, for hosting us again. As I explained already, I've been over 7 years in cybersecurity, taking care of governance, risk compliance, risk assessments, vulnerability scanning, penetration testing, policies and procedures, and also aligning to ISO 27001, this cybersecurity framework, GDPR, and other regulations. Currently at the MFSA, I'm taking care of the cybersecurity team for internal systems, running vulnerability scans ourselves, penetration testing, network stress testing, and also upgrading our policies and procedures.
Okay, thank you. So before we start with the first question, I would like to reiterate, like I do every time, that if there are any questions, comments, queries, suggestions, you can just send them to the email that you can see on the screen, and we'll get right on it. So my first question is between the relationship between threat-led penetration testing under the DORA regulation and TIBER-EU. So what's the difference?
As we already mentioned in the previous episode, the European supervisory authorities are to develop specific regulatory technical standards for DORA TLPT in accordance with the TIBER-EU framework. We also need to mention that DORA has introduced some differences compared to TIBER regarding mainly the scope of the tests, the use of internal testers, and the use of pool testing. In a TIBER exercise, the entity should identify all its critical functions and underlying systems, and all of this should be included in the scope of the test. But in a DORA TLPT, the entity could decide which critical or important function should be tested based on their own assessment. In both type of exercises, the competent authority has to agree on the critical function identification and validate the scope of the test. In the current version of the TIBER, both the threat intelligence and the red team provider should be external, but DORA allows the use of internal testers for the red team phase of the test, excluding credit institutions which are classified as significant institution, and if these capabilities exist at the entity level and are approved by the entity supervisor. However, the threat intelligence in DORA TLPT should be always external to the financial entities, and for the cases in which the red teaming is provided internally, an external tester should replace the internal team once every 3 tests. Another different concept introduced by DORA is the pool testing that involve the participation of several financial entities sharing the same ICT third-party service providers in a TLPT, and for which the provider can directly enter into contractual arrangement with an external tester. The European Supervisory Authority must develop specific RTS for DORA TLPT in accordance with the TIBER framework, taking into consideration all these differences. We look forward to seeing the draft RTS, and would also like to mention that a public consultation will take place in this regard.
Thank you, Mihai. So with the above established, I would like to talk more about TIBER-EU framework, which is a very structured framework. So it has stakeholders, phases, and different types of teams and reports. So what are these? Can you go into further detail on what's the framework and who's involved and what is involved?
Yes, the TIBER-EU is the European framework developed by the European Central Bank based on the experience gained by analyze jurisdictions, and threat intelligence-based ethical red teaming. The main objective of the framework is to provide the European financial sector with an effective methodology for TLPT that could be applied to systematically important entities operating in one or more jurisdictions. The objective of a red teaming exercise is to assess the entity's cyber defense capabilities, the so-called blue team, without their knowledge and involving the tools used by real attackers, which possess extended threat intelligence and cyber attack capabilities. These capabilities are to be simulated by highly skilled professionals, the threat intelligence provider and the red teaming provider. At the entity level, the test must be conducted by a small internal team, the white team, having the necessary knowledge and competence to manage all practical aspects of the exercise. The tested entity will be assisted from the beginning to the end of the test process by a specialized team within the national competent authority called TIBER Cyber Team.
Now that Mihai has briefly introduced the TIBER stakeholders, I would like to focus on how these stakeholders interact in the different phases of the TIBER test. Every TIBER test should go through 3 mandatory phases. 1, the preparation phase, 2, the testing phase, and finally the closure phase. So in the preparation phase, the cyber team is involved, and they need to define the scope with the clients or with the entity. The external services are contracted, and all the necessary roles at the entity level are set up with the right individuals, which means the Y team. And then the scope of the test should be based on the entity's critical functions. During phase 2, the testing phase, the targeted threat intelligence report, using the scenarios contained in the targeted threat intelligence report, the red team should develop and execute realistic attack scenarios on the target life systems and services. The blue team then is the Security Operations Center for the entity that is subject to the test, whose prevention, detection, and response capabilities are being tested without their foreknowledge. Then the third phase is the closure phase, in which the red team test report is provided. The report will include a detailed explanation of the approach taken to the testing, the findings and observations from the test, and the advice on areas for improvement, which are to be considered by the entity. The remediation plan would be shared with all stakeholders, including the entity's senior management and supervisory authorities. The red team test report is discussed with the blue team, including the recommendations for remediation.
Thank you. So after the test, financial entities are obviously presented with the results of the test, and there's something that needs to be done about this, I would expect. So what's expected from the results of the tests?
At the end of a TIBER test, the entity should take on board all the issues discovered during the test and build a remediation plan with the necessary action to address the findings identified during testing and mitigate the identified vulnerabilities. The test summary report should be also shared with the national competent authorities, and based on the overall test documentation, an attestation would be issued as to whether the test has been conducted in accordance with the framework requirements.
The remediation plans may include different mitigations, such as governance improvements, which includes policies and procedures or using frameworks, and also different processes. Security controls improvements, which includes implementing security hardening of systems, defense and in-depth approach, operating system and application upgrades, updates, reconfigurations, or even complete replacement if they are end-of-life products, hardware configurations and updates or upgrades as well, improvement in the availability and capacity management of the systems being used, implementation of new security devices such as intrusion detection systems, intrusion prevention systems, firewalls, and backup solutions. Improvements to the security baselines using frameworks such as the CIS benchmarks, best practices provided by the manufacturers, or even other guides. Identity and access management improvements, which means segregation of duties, least privileges, and need-to-know basis. And very importantly nowadays that everything is moving to the cloud workloads, having the correct security controls such as firewalls, monitoring, and backups enabled on the cloud provided systems, which are not usually enabled by default but need to be configured by the entity itself. And then further testing of the implemented solutions to make sure that the implemented remediations have made the required effect.
Thank you for your answer. So Mihai, this one specifically for you. So we have, as you know, released a consultation document on the national adoption of the framework in Malta. Is there any update to that consultation document?
Yes, we are pleased to see a lot of interest from the industry. We receive very substantial feedback from the financial entities and from security providers, and a lot of questions, many of them demonstrating a deep understanding of the subject. At this moment, all the feedback received is being processed, and a summary of the result will be published by the authority in the coming months. Regarding the future steps on the adoption of the framework, as the time of the recording, the MFSA, alongside with other relevant public stakeholders, will be working together in identifying the best national implementation options.
Thank you so much for accepting my invite. Thank you so much for coming here today. These are all the questions that I had prepared for you. Any comments that you guys would like to make?
Thank you, Beatrice, for inviting us again. It was a pleasure to discuss these security concerns with you.
Of course, always.
Thank you, Beatrice.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for watching was once again. See you soon. And once again, reiterating that any comments, questions, suggestions, queries can be sent to the email that you can see on the screen right now. Thank you very much and see you later.